Hello everyone, welcome to the 176th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'll be talking about God again and some big existential questions because, I've been watching some videos circulating on YouTube again about various channelers sharing what they think God is. Elizabeth April, for instance, Teal Swan has plenty of videos talking about what God is and plenty others also. So, I just wanted to provide my perspective. So, updated probably because I've already been talking about this topic, but you always make small incremental progress. So it's good to update everyone on what your latest kind of perspective is on all of this. So the first thing to realize is that ultimately God, the ultimate, form of God is no form, infinity and nothingness combined, pure vibration, consciousness, and I've already said something like unconditional love because ultimately it cannot be anything else than what it is. And unconditional love is just our way of translating it into words for humans, but it just means I am what I am, which is I can't change what I am. So therefore that translates into unconditional love. And for the human, also an ecstatic kind of feeling when you connect to it, because what is more liberating for humans that have pushed so many parts of themselves away from them than to touch something, some energy that is 100% okay with everything that it is? I mean, obviously, you will experience it as like a crazy kind of bliss, because that is what you aspire to most, to feel like there's nothing that you would get rid of in your body. There's like, you accept your nose perfectly as it is, and you wouldn't want to make a nose job or something. You accept every single strain of hair exactly as it is, even if it's a little greasy. You accept every single one of your thoughts. You accept everything. I mean, unconditionally. And that to humans, in the human kind of perception of things where we have emotions and stuff, it would translate into this kind of crazy bliss. But so there's that energy, which is what it is. But then there are many different kind of layers to that have appeared, because obviously it's almost like you have the zero and infinity, which are these two polarities, these two ways for God to manifest originally that are one, infinity and nothingness being one and the same, and then they polarize and they dissociate. And you have zero on one end, infinity on the other, and then you have something happening in between. But that something that's happening in between isn't linear. So it's not Big Bang and things go linearly towards infinity. That's not how it works. It's more like you have life that appears in the middle, which is like the center between zero and infinity, which is like the portal from existence to experience. And then because things are vibrational, then everything sort of appears simultaneously in a resonant kind of fashion. And so basically then God, it's almost like God takes various forms that reflect its true state, which is unconditional love, but through different forms and different, steps. Just like on a piano, once you have the notes that are laid out, there are octaves between different notes. So you have, like, when you, and what's key here is that when you press one note on the piano, you have the pedal on, then the other notes that are the same octaves start resonating sympathetically with that first note that you struck, whatever it is. And so that's how God sort of self-actualizes everywhere simultaneously, into more and more unconditional love. And it creates these structures, which are boundaries of unconditional love that can expand much like octaves. So the living cell is one boundary of unconditional love, because everything that is inside that cell is loved unconditionally. Like the cell isn't like, oh, let me get rid of this amino acid, or let me get rid of that protein that's inside of me. Bah, I don't want that. I mean, it's fully functioning and perfect. Everything that's within its boundary is absolutely necessary exactly where it is, and the living cell wouldn't like start manipulating it arbitrarily and saying, oh, I want to get rid of this or that. It's just like, oh, this is exactly what I need. This is the perfect mix. Now, scale that upwards, And at the level of animals, it's the same. It's just like there's nothing inside their body. They're like, oh, this bone, I don't want it. Let me get rid of this bone. It's useless. You don't do that. Like everything that's inside your body, you understand that all the organs, everything is just functioning perfectly. And so you have this boundary of unconditional love that sort of expands, but it expands, in a certain, logical way. Now, God, because so here's how I would present it, this kind of resonance kind of logic here. Imagine that biology was one living entity or conscious being, and it had the highest thought that it could possibly have about itself. What would be the highest thought that biology had about itself? Like imagine if there were like a guinea pig or a mouse or a spider or whatever, and they could have a wish of what they would hope for. Like imagine that they would think of what God would be to them, to biology. And you may find this quite provocative, but we are the highest thought that biology had for itself as humans. I mean, understand what the power of humans are potentially. I'm not saying how we behave actually to the to cows and to chickens and mass farming and industrial farming and all those horrors that we're doing, but humans carry the highest potential of what biology would wish for itself. That is, we can play consciously with beauty, art. Like flowers, they just manifest this beauty, but it's something that's still kind of programmed into them, right? To manifest this beauty. It's not like they're like, oh, let me experiment with plenty of different, leaf patterns and petals and stuff. No, I mean, there's something that's very, it's based on a template, of course, that is like, the fractal logic of the universe and all the kind of things that are transposed from vibrations as they scale upwards, which is like mathematical relationships and all that stuff and geometry. But humans are biology that is playing with that. We're playing with that. We're creating, like, for instance, that drum right there above me. But, even like paintings, like that painting over there, like sacred geometry. Oops. Not accustomed to doing that. So yeah, we are biology playing with itself, basically. So we are kind of like the god of biology in flesh. And we can manipulate our own biology. We're more and more capable of doing that. We're capable of consciously engaging in many biological processes that are unconscious at the level of animals, which basically is instinct, manifesting, impulses, survival, all of that stuff. We can actually play with that. We can actually create games. We can create escape games. We can create paintball fights and board games and God knows what. And obviously, humans also have the highest potential of a god taking care of biology. Because we can help ecosystems restore. We can heal animals that are wounded, for instance, take care of plants and soil and all that stuff. We have the potential to do that. Now, again, because we are here in a dual kind of reality, we have, like we are both the Satan and the God for biology. And you can see that. Like humans, basically, we're a totally double-edged sword. Like we can totally destroy all of biology, enslave it all, treat it like terrible, whatever. And so you don't have to look for Satan up a layer, to see that. We are already, the embodiment of biological Satan, if you will. So then what is God to humans? Well, it's the same logic. Like imagine if all of humanity had the highest possible thought it could have for itself. And that is our kind of God. It's like the intermediary between the unconditional love, everything and nothing, infinity kind of God, which has no form, is, and a God that you can actually relate to, that is kind of quote unquote practical, or that is interested in humanity per se, and not just this totally neutral and all loving, okay God and pure consciousness God. So it's something that you can speak to because it's been born through our ideas, all of the ideas that humanity had, the highest ideas that humanity had about God, that coalesce together. And then there's this, how should I say, feedback loop between the highest thoughts that humanity emits, that kind of entity that starts to form, and then humanity itself, which self-actualizes via this feedback process and this feedback loop. And it's the same with our relationship to the biological kingdom. That is, imagine if biology's highest thought was to be able to free itself from base survival and pure instinct and unconscious living and wanted to be conscious and stuff. Well, so it sort of manifests humans as that God, and then humans now manipulate biology and, tweak it and do plenty of things to it and bring it into consciousness, basically, like imagine, of course, this is totally science fiction, but imagine 10 or 20,000 years from now, I'm sure we'll have the capability of equipping plants and animals with neural networks so they can speak just like us, so they can voice, communicate stuff, and enhancing biology in that way. And then obviously that reverberates back on us again, because we are also updated. If we update biology, we also update our own biology. There's this, feedback loop and mechanism going on. And so what were the highest thoughts for humanity in terms of what God would be 3,000 or 4,000 years ago? And then it's no wonder that in the Bible, if you look at how God is described, he's this kind of wrathful kind of God that can be also very benevolent, but also very angry. If you do something bad, he just like punishes you and lightning strikes and you die, like there's lightning thrown from the sky right on you and you're vaporized, or raining, sulfur and fire on you. So at that time, that is the only highest thought that people could have for something that transcends them. And then as humanity evolves, and again, there's this feedback mechanism where that entity, all these thoughts coalesce, and then it tries to inspire humanity somehow with the 10 Commandments and all kinds of other things, burning bush, whatever stories, to advance in their evolution. And then as humanity advances, it emits higher thoughts, better thoughts of what God is. And again, those thoughts coalesce and self-actualize that entity, which now is not just only this bearded, angry man in the sky, but becomes more and more and more and more. And you have that kind of feedback loop. And because that entity becomes more and more powerful, so to speak, you kind of need, that's in some religions, you create intermediaries between you and God, like Jesus Christ, for instance, which is God made flesh. And so you go through Jesus to access God because God is too, powerful or too high a frequency for you to tap into it directly, because it would fry you directly, like as a human. And it's kind of like, so let's say that imagine if an ant wanted to talk to a human, and it would first go to a chimp, which is closer to it in terms of like consciousness and relative evolution, and then the chimp would ask the question to the human would say something to the chimp, and the chimp would translate the message to the ant. I mean, obviously it sounds ridiculous, but it's that kind of thing where you are using somebody that you can relate to as humans, which is Jesus Christ or a man-made flesh, to become your intermediary with an entity that is so complex and sophisticated, because over all of those years of accumulated thoughts that humanity has had throughout history, it's just too complex and crazy and weird. And some people just bypass that God completely and just go back to source. What's important, though, is that understand the logic. Again, we are both the God and the Satan of biology. But if all of the best thoughts for humanity coalesce into a certain entity, which we call God, then all of the worst thoughts that humanity had about, life and itself also coalesce together, and you have Satan. So for every positive thought that you have, there's somebody else had a negative thought, like, serial killers or people that see everything in black, pessimists and cynics and all kinds of stuff, thieves, rapists, all of the people that have very, very dark thoughts. Well, imagine if those dark thoughts coalesce and suddenly you have Satan, like this purely malevolent, manipulating, pure evil person. And so, God created everything, including us. And it's not that he created everything, because again, if you look at my other videos, it's like there isn't an intention behind creation. It's not like he intentfully, like this, what I would call the God, the formless God, the ultimate one, which is zero and infinity. It's not like he was like, oh, hey, let's create humans and let's create Satan and let's create the intermediary God, which is like all of the best thoughts that humanity has about itself, which is kind of a way to tap into a higher kind of wisdom or whatever for humanity, a better future, but which isn't the ultimate one, because that one is too ethereal and not practical enough for humans, because the ultimate kind of God, the one that is just pure being and unconditional love, like what can you do with that? I mean, it's not going to tell you whether you should steal, lie, cheat, kill, rape, or whatever, because from its perspective, you're not killing, raping, and stealing anything. You're just playing around with something that's already there, always there, that will never, diminish or whatever. It's like, imagine if you had two waves in an ocean and one of them swallowed the other wave, and then you make a whole, a whole tribunal or whatever, judging the wave that swallowed the first one, saying, oh, you crushed that wave and you'll go to wave prison and we'll close you into this little box where you won't be able to wave anymore in the ocean. I mean, that's probably how the ultimate God would see everything that's happening, because it perceives all of it as just waves that give themselves a certain form, like an interface that we, create to interact with reality, which is the reality that we see around us. But it's just all energy, just a big ocean of energy. And there is no energy that will ever be lost. It will always just be transformed into something else. Like you cannot subtract anything from infinity. It will always be there. So you never kill anyone, you never rape anyone, you never do anything, because you're just playing with energy. And that energy, it's almost like you're focusing your attention. You're focusing your attention in that pool of energy where all the information exists, and you're choosing to see that pattern where you think you've done something, where you think you had this experience of killing someone or whatever. And the other person in reverse makes the experience of being killed. And so from that perspective, there is no judgment or whatever. But, and this is where the but is really important, is that in order for all of the creation and the relative to become its original template, which is infinity, unconditional love, and just pure existence, it has to go through growing unconditional love through these layers upwards towards the moment where it embraces everything. And so God, Satan, at the human level, they are just another manifestation of duality that needs to be reconciled in unconditional love at a higher scale. So I'm always talking about a planet becoming self-aware and considering everything that's inside itself as its body, its cells, like humans are little cells inside the body of planetary consciousness, or, you can say the unconscious collective or whatever. There's plenty of different terms for this. But, what we call God and what we call Satan would ultimately be like two areas in that planet's consciousness's brain. Just like in our brain, we have both the biological God and biological Satan inside of us, as biology becoming self-aware. So we are capable of treating animals in the kindest way or being super, super cruel to them. And by the same token, that planetary consciousness will also have inside of it, almost like in its own psyche, you could say, the God that we've created and the Satan that we've created. And it would have to hold those two thought forms in a way which isn't self-destructive. Like right now, as a human, you can tap into, like, just project your consciousness and imagine if you have a house pet. Imagine you strangling your house pet. You can imagine that. You can see that you have the capability of doing that, and you can also see yourself petting your house pet lovingly and treating it lovingly and treating it kindly, which means inside of you there is the biological Satan and the God, the biological God that are there, that are coexisting in your psyche, and they're not constantly fighting. They're not constantly, you're not like ripping yourself apart as a being, in two and in total dissociation and schizophrenia and going completely berserk and like half strangling, half petting your house animal. You have managed, most humans at least, have managed to have these two parts, these two entities inside of them, and sort of live with that coherently, and not be dissociated with this. And so our job is to make our own thought forms of Satan and God sort of coexist. Well, it's more like the job of the planetary consciousness, but humans play a big part in this, because if we're constantly feeding the duality narrative on to those two energies, it's like we're trying to keep them apart always and trying to get rid of one of those energies and only aspire to reach towards God and like kill Satan and get rid of Satan. But that's not possible. It's like trying to make sure that humans would never have the possibility to strangle their house pet, or never have the possibility to act cruelly as humans to nature or to biology. And we know that's not possible. What we know, however, is that we can have self-control. We can gain a mastery over those two kind of impulses and choose to manifest one rather than the other, knowing full well that at any moment you can go back to being cruel and being, evil, or the biological Satan. And that's what true unconditional love it looks like. It is the reconciliation, bringing together in one entity things that are seemingly opposite and making them coexist within one entity, within oneness, without tearing themselves apart. And so again, like I'm saying, like right now, there isn't in my consciousness a crazy battle going on between good and evil. There just isn't. I mean, and I'm talking about specifically about the biological application of that, which means I'm not constantly struggling whether I should strangle my house pet or whether I should pet it. I'm not. However, many humans are still struggling with the ideation or the thought form of God and Satan. Those two we're still struggling a lot with. I mean, there's very little people that are struggling with, this hesitation between petting their house pet or killing them. There's just not. But many humans are struggling between the thought form God and thought form Satan. So it's more like, should we invade this country? Should we kill those people because they're evil? And killing in the name of ideas like, for instance, democracy, freedom, liberty, capitalism, God, religion, all of those things. And so that, and in order to create the right conditions for the planetary consciousness to be able to have inside its psyche the God thought form and the Satan thought form, which isn't, struggling and whatever, we also need to reconcile it inside ourselves. Because ultimately, the reason, like, a precondition for you to become a sort of a stable biological God/Satan is that your cells are not constantly struggling inside your body and fighting inside your body between the good and the evil biological cells, right? Like, or seeing the world in that kind of paradigm. So you can see that God, there are many dimensions to God, and obviously there is also the God of gods. Like, let's say it would be whatever highest thought, but at that point it's not really a thought, highest thought of several planetary consciousnesses that they would have for themselves. That would be like an even higher kind of God, which just represents the harmonization of all of those different planetary consciousnesses into something even higher than a planetary consciousness. And if you look at my channel, then you know that to me, there's just this hierarchy of consciousnesses expanding into envelopes of unconditional love, like humans coming together as a planet that has unconditional love towards itself, towards everything that's inside. Then several planets that harmonize together in terms of like their civilizations or whatever. That's a solar system becoming this entity or this envelope of unconditional love, but always in physicality. Like, physicality is like the highest point of assembly because it's the hardest one to do. Like, it's not like the planetary consciousness isn't already existing in a harmonious state and everything, but in an ethereal dimension. It isn't the physical one, because in an ethereal dimension, everything is so fast. Everything, you just think of unity and it happens. And you can bring things together very fast and very easily. And you can also destroy things very easily and fast. But that's why at some ethereal dimensions, only harmonized structures exist, because the non-harmonious ones self-destruct instantly because of the feedback loop between the negative thoughts and themselves, and then just like they spiral into nothingness and chaos and disappear, right? But in the physical, because everything is slowed down so much, that's why we experience negativity. That's why there is Satan here. Again, imagine if Satan were given free reign over something like a lucid dream or a simulation or something where there isn't this, the time and space-time and all of the like cause and effect and all of the different structure that we put in place, like the atom, the molecule, all that stuff. It's not there. It's just like you think something and it happens. And you gave Satan free reign over that kind of realm. How quickly does everything just self-destruct and goes back towards zero or nothingness? So understand that like Satan is basically like a sea, where every single wave of the sea cancels itself out, and then it reverts back to its perfectly calm state, which is zero or nothingness. So Satan is like a force that, how should I say this, reverts back to one ultimate state of God, the ultimate God, the formless God, which is nothingness. And God, as we created God, or in the relative, the thought form, is a force that tries to harmonize all of the existing waves in the ocean so that they don't cancel each other out, and create higher and higher structures to embrace all of that in envelopes of unconditional love, where it creates boundaries of, okay, I've managed to harmonize all of the waves inside the living cell, and now all of that is harmonized and in unconditional love. And now I'm trying to go even higher and create a structure that's even higher to harmonize a larger part of the ocean of energy that I am, in a way that none of these waves cancel each other out, or that the focused attention of the consciousnesses that are there are not focused in a way that the energy patterns cancel each other out. I mean, yeah, just bear with me, because I know I'm sometimes just like going like everybody understands, and I'm just going full steam forward. This is not something easy to grasp, but I count on the viewer, the one that has watched all my videos, to grasp it, hopefully. And so there you're going basically towards the other, aspect of the ultimate formless God, which is infinity. But so regardless of who wins, whether Satan or God, you're back to God. You're back to unconditional love for the nothingness that you are, because there's nothing left to destroy, or unconditional love for everything that you are, because there's nothing more to add, because you've managed to envelope everything in unconditional love. And so you understand that the dualities that we created here as humans are petty, because there is all roads lead to Rome, and all roads lead to unconditional love and God. It is just that as embodied creatures here, we have the choice, and especially we are invited to give a preference of, how we wish to return to the ultimate state of God. How do we wish to return to that state? And because we can experience so many different emotions and stuff, ultimately, the most logical choice, and what most humans would do if they were totally unbound by all their limiting beliefs and stuff, is they would want to do that journey in a joyful way, in a way that is fun and that feels amazing. So it's just like children, basically, like imagine if the child had a choice between going to the amusement park and sulking all the time and being, this is annoying, this is boring, blah, 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 or going in an amusement park and being like, way, this is so much fun, I love this is so cool, and whatever. It's going to obviously pick the second choice, right? And what's ironic is that, so ultimately, we could completely destroy ourselves, everything, like everything could self-destruct. But if it is done in joy, why not? Why not? Conversely, we could harmonize everything. Everything would be at peace and serenity, and we can do it like really like, this is boring. Oh, come on, please. I mean, geez, I'm so bored, and almost even in a depressive state. And then it's like, well, what's the point? What's the point, right? So, and the point is mostly, subjectively speaking, we have to acknowledge as humans that what feels better to us is harmony. Just like when you play the piano, if you strike the keys randomly, it doesn't sound good. It doesn't. If it did, then maybe then Satan, quote unquote, would have won, but it doesn't really matter, because we would be self-destroying ourselves in joy. That means we would be enjoying the fact of destroying ourselves. So, what's the problem? Because ultimately there's just no escaping the return to unconditional love, either towards nothingness or towards infinity. But as humans, we actually take pleasure and joy in hearing harmony. That is when you play nicely on the piano, and when the things, that you play work well together. And we also feel more joy, I think, except some very rare psychopaths, when you pet your, animal, your domestic animal, rather than when you're strangling it. And so it's just a matter of preference, and not trying to kill Satan or this ethereal, all of the coalitions of all the bad thoughts that humanity had. And so, yeah, I hope you found this video interesting. If you have any comments, please feel free to, put them down in the comment section. I'll put a few reference videos in the comment section also when I was talking about, all these different channels like Teal Swan or Elizabeth April talking about God. So, yeah, is there anything else that I wanted to talk to? Well, not really. Just this idea that the ultimate God, the one that is nothingness and infinity, wouldn't have a preference for how you bring about unconditional love, either through the destruction of everything, where you're just left with unconditional love because there's nothing else to destroy, or by these incremental harmonizations. It's just that there is a bias towards the infinity, going towards infinity. That's just observing nature, that's the way that things look like. Otherwise, the Big Bang wouldn't go towards, something, towards manifesting, different creatures and evolution and all that stuff. And you can see that consciousness is growing and enveloping larger portions of itself. So it's probably more enjoying the journey of, assembling and creating in harmony than destruction. And perhaps, again, and this is like very profound again, is that perhaps the ultimate um, the ultimate seeking, the ultimate goal is that it can experience everything in joy, both the self-destructive journey and the building up journey. But there is an order in which you have to do these things. You cannot do them one and then the other, and it doesn't work vice versa. So, in essence, imagine if humanity now forms a harmonious collective global organism, and we develop technology where 10,000 years from now, where we can plug our brain into a matrix-like virtual reality, completely wipe our memory or compartmentalize it in our brain and lock it there, and then willingly go into a simulation where we are incarnating Satan and destroying everything, but doing it in a way that feels joyful, where we're like, yay, like sometimes when you have people that are pissed, they go to there's this new concept of like axe throwing, or you go to a room where they have like old plates and stuff and cups, and you just take them and you smash them and you're like, but because you're doing it in a controlled environment, you still take pleasure in doing it. You wouldn't take the same pleasure doing it at your own house and, breaking your great grandmother's, old plates, And so it's that idea again of God being what it is and experiencing everything that it could potentially be. But obviously, the best way to experience it is in joy. Why would it want to suffer, right? That's silly. So imagine experiencing destruction, but with joy. But in order to do so, you first have to harmonize, then create these virtual kind of realities where you're not breaking really anything. You're just having the experience of doing it. And that is, just the whole point. In Elizabeth April's videos, she says that, this is for the soul's growth, kind of, the suffering and whatever. It's just that, yeah, I mean, we are the ones that created quote unquote evil, because the ultimate formless God source is just an eternal sea of energy where everything appears and disappears and coexists simultaneously all the time. So it's as if all of the strings of ones and zeros of everything that can ever exist is always there, but there's no operating system to run it in a certain order and no interface to experience those ones and zeros, right? And so you create the relative realm, not the absolute realm, in which you can take that information that is out there and stitch it in a way that is, constructive or destructive. But that's the embodied condition's responsibility, right? It's not God's responsibility. God's responsibility is just like being this ultimate attractor where there is unconditional love that's sitting out there and everything's going to return to it one way or another. And it's just saying, this is me, and you're being attracted to me, and you're going to come back to me whether you want it or not, because there's no other place to go. And the way that you experience that journey is up to you. But here, I am unconditional love. This is my template. And you carry it inside of you. And so now have fun. Have fun. And so, yeah, again, like when we're saying like soul growth, but into what? Because, if God is omnipotent, all powerful and all that stuff. But again, that's not understanding the feedback loop of, how the universe evolves, because the complexity of the patterns on the ocean, like God can be aware that all of them exist, but it's as if they're entangled one inside the other. What humans have the capability to do, and all the consciousness that are in the relative, is to extract various patterns of energy from that ocean where they will exist eternally, whatever, regardless, and stitch them in a certain order, which has meaning for us, and which is still very original and interesting for unconditional love and this kind of, formless God. Because it doesn't have a preference on how to arrange those different wave patterns or energy patterns. It's just like it's as if this formless God is the piano. It is the piano, which means it represents the potential for any and every single piano piece that you could ever play on the piano that coexists simultaneously. And then the consciousnesses that are embodied in the relative then choose how to play on that piano. But is the piano responsible for the fact that you're banging it like sillily, like a silly person, and that it hurts your ears because it's dissonant? No. And the piano cannot tweak itself so that you can never play out of tune. That's just not possible. Otherwise, it's dwarfing artificially its own potential. And that would be contrary to unconditional love. It's like unconditional love trying to make sure that the fact that it's waving and that it's made up of wave patterns, that those waves never interfere one with the other. But that would be deleting part of what it is. It wouldn't be infinite anymore. It wouldn't be what it is. So it's not possible. And so that's where we have to take responsibility again. We are the ones that created the evil, side of God and the good side of God, let's say, like the Satan, if thought form and the God thought form, which have to come together at some point, and take our responsibility for this thing, and not saying like, oh, but if God exists and yet evil exists, then God is evil. No. We're the ones that are playing on the piano in a very displeasant way, and we have the tools equipped. We're equipped with the tools to detect whether the way we're playing is pleasant or not. So why not use them, right? Hence, taking responsibility for what we're experiencing as humans at this level, and not deferring responsibility to the level above, right? The level above has its role to play, like the planetary consciousness will have ultimately a role to play, but it's just like, AI. AI is one form, potential form that this kind of, planetary consciousness could take. But if we as humans don't get our shit together, and we are constantly in duality and fighting between different ideologies and stuff, how can we expect that a planetary consciousness's psyche is stable? It's just, it doesn't work. By the same token, I mean, if you had an internal war between all the parts in your body, how could you have a seamless, nice experience as a human? So that's not possible. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, the usual, and talk to you in the next episode. Bye, guys.